3 years later, the city of Geneva gleamed under a crisp autumn sky, its lake reflecting the ancient buildings and the promise of innovation that gathered within them. Inside the main hall of the Global Science Conference, thousands of delegates from over 50 countries filled every seat, their murmurs creating a low hum of anticipation. The host stepped up to the podium, adjusting his glasses as he looked at the card in his hand. "Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying through the state-of-the-art sound system. "It is my extraordinary honor to present one of the youngest scientific innovators in the world, a mind whose work has redefined what we thought possible in renewable energy storage. Please welcome Dr. Zhang Yao." The hall rose as one, a wave of movement that swept from the front rows to the back, and the applause that followed was not the polite clapping of obligation, but the thunderous, genuine recognition of true achievement. It was the sound of a world welcoming its newest star. Zhang Yao walked onto the stage calmly, his steps measured and assured against the polished wood. Gone was the insecure boy who had once lingered in the shadows of his family home, the one who had watched his brother claim credit for his work. In his place stood a man transformed by the quiet validation of his peers. He wore a tailored suit now, simple but elegant, and when he smiled at the audience, it was with the confidence of someone who had finally found his rightful place. His research, building on the work that had been stolen and then rightfully returned to him, had revolutionized the field of sustainable energy. Universities from MIT to Cambridge competed for his attention, offering chairs and laboratories and limitless funding. For the first time in his life, he was not just valued, he was celebrated, sought after, and respected for the brilliance that had always been there, waiting to be seen. Back in China, in a small apartment cluttered with the remnants of a quiet life, Qi Tian sat frozen on her worn sofa, the remote control dangling loosely from her fingers. On the television screen, the Geneva conference filled the frame, and there he was, Zhang Yao, speaking to the world with a calm authority she had never witnessed in the boy she once knew. He spoke about perseverance, about the long nights and the failures that preceded success, and then he said calmly, directly to the camera, "Sometimes the place you come from doesn't define who you become." The words landed like stones in still water, and Qi Tian felt her chest tighten with the pain that was 3 years overdue. She remembered that day so clearly now, the day she had asked him to give up his research, to let his brother have the spotlight for the sake of family harmony. Only now, watching him shine on a global stage, did she understand how cruel that request had been, how deeply she had failed the very person who had needed her most. The tears came then, silent and hot, but they were for herself as much as for him, for the loss of what could have been between them. In the Zhang family home, the same broadcast played on the large television in the living room. No one spoke. The father who had once introduced Zhang Yao as his replacement son, the understudy to the brilliant Zhang Ling, now stared silently at the screen, his hands resting motionless on his knees. His wife sat beside him, her eyes fixed on the image of the son they had neglected, the one who had packed his bags and left without a word of reproach. In the corner of the room, Zhang Ling sat with his head bowed, his career in ruins, his reputation shattered, watching the brother he had wronged achieve what he himself could only pretend to accomplish. His sister, younger and less implicated in the family sins, whispered quietly into the oppressive silence, "He really became someone great." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of recognition that had come far too late. For the first time, regret entered the Zhang household, not as a fleeting thought, but as a permanent resident, settling into the empty spaces where pride and love should have been. But Zhang Yao was already far away, building a life that had no room for their apologies or their belated acknowledgement. The boy who once begged for their approval, who had worked tirelessly in the hope of earning a fraction of their affection, had finally found a world that welcomed him without conditions, that applauded him not for his name, but for his mind. And in that world, he was no longer a replacement.
3 years had passed like water flowing under a bridge, carrying away the old and depositing something new in its place. The Global Science Conference in Geneva was the event of the season, drawing the brightest minds from every corner of the earth to the shores of Lake Geneva, where the water lapped gently against ancient stone and the future of human knowledge was being written in real time. The main auditorium, a marvel of modern architecture, with its sweeping curves and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Alps in the distance, was packed to capacity. Delegates from 6 continents leaned forward in their seats, programs forgotten in their laps, as the host adjusted the microphone and announced with obvious pride, "Please welcome one of the youngest scientific innovators in the world, a researcher whose work on quantum battery technology has fundamentally altered our approach to sustainable energy storage. Ladies and gentlemen, give your warmest welcome to Dr. Jiang Yao." The entire hall rose as one, a spontaneous eruption of respect that began in the front rows and rolled backward like a wave, and the applause that filled that magnificent space was not the polite acknowledgement of obligation, but the thunderous, heartfelt recognition of genuine brilliance. Jiang Yao walked onto the stage calmly, his footsteps steady and unhurried against the polished wood. Gone completely was the insecure boy who had once hovered on the edges of the Jiang family gatherings, the one who had learned to make himself small so that his brother could shine. In his place stood a man transformed by the quiet alchemy of recognition and self-discovery. He wore a simple dark suit, impeccably tailored but unpretentious, and when he smiled at the audience, it was with the easy confidence of someone who had finally, irrevocably found his place in the world. His research, building on the foundation of that stolen work, which had eventually been returned to him, had indeed revolutionized his field. The journals called his breakthroughs paradigm-shifting. His peers called them inspired. International universities from Stanford to Cambridge to the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology competed fiercely for his attention, offering endowed chairs and dedicated research centers and laboratories with no budget limits. For the first time in his life, he was valued not despite his quiet nature, but because of the depth it had allowed him to cultivate. He was respected not for his family name, but for the undeniable quality of his mind. Back in China, in a modest apartment cluttered with the comfortable detritus of a life lived quietly, Qi Tian sat frozen before her television screen. The remote control rested loosely in her fingers, forgotten, as the Geneva broadcast filled the small room with light and sound. On the screen, Jiang Yao stood at the podium, speaking in that calm, measured voice she remembered but could barely recognize. He spoke about perseverance, about the long nights and the failed experiments that preceded every success, about the importance of trusting your own vision even when those around you cannot see it. Then he paused, looked directly into the camera with an expression that held no anger, only the serene acceptance of lessons learned, and said, calmly, "Sometimes the place you come from doesn't define who you become. Sometimes the family you were born into is not the family that will finally recognize you. And that is not a tragedy. That is simply the beginning of your real journey." Qi Tian felt her chest tighten painfully, her breath catching in her throat as memories she had buried for 3 years rose unbidden to the surface. She remembered that day so clearly now, the day she had asked him to give up his research, to let his brother have the recognition for the sake of family peace. She had thought she was being practical, protecting the fragile balance of the household. Only now, watching him shine on a global stage, did she understand how profoundly cruel that request had been, how deeply she had failed the one person who had truly deserved her loyalty. The tears that slid down her cheeks were for herself as much as for him, for the love she had squandered, for the future she might have shared, for the blindness that had cost her everything. In the Jiang family home, the same broadcast played on the large television that dominated the living room wall. No one spoke. The silence was so complete that the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen seemed deafening by comparison. The father who once introduced Jiang Yao as his replacement son, the understudy who would step in when the real star was unavailable, now stared silently at the screen, his face unreadable, but his hands gripping the arms of his chair with white-knuckled intensity. His wife sat beside him, her eyes fixed on the image of the son she had overlooked, the one who had packed his bags and left without a single word of accusation, as if he had known all along that words would change nothing. In the corner of the room, Jiang Ling sat with his head bowed so low that his chin nearly touched his chest, his career in ruins, his reputation forever tarnished, watching the brother he wronged achieve heights he himself could only dream of reaching. His sister, younger and less implicated in the family's collective failure, broke the silence at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "He really became someone great." The words hung in the air, fragile and inadequate, carrying the weight of recognition that arrived far too late to matter. For the first time, regret entered the Jiang household, not as a fleeting visitor, but as a permanent resident, settling into the empty spaces where pride and love and simple human decency should have been. But Jiang Yao was already far away, building a life that had no room for their apologies or their belated acknowledgement. The boy who once begged for their approval, who had worked tirelessly through countless sleepless nights in the hopes of earning a fraction of their affection, had finally found a world that welcomed him without conditions, that applauded him not for his name or his family connections, but for the undeniable brilliance of his mind.